Hello and welcome to A Stitch in Time. Today is Friday, May 12th, 2017, and this is episode 17. My name is Carol, and you can find me on Ravelry as Knits and Pearls. The show notes for this and every episode are posted on the blog at astitchintimepodcast.blogspot.ca, and I've now begun including them in the episode thread in the Ravelry group. And the Ravelry group can be found by searching A Stitch in Time Podcast under the Groups tab. Come on by, join in the conversation, and if you like, you can take part in our Agatha Christie along. This is a very casual knit along, crochet along, craft along, just basically knit or crochet, anything that you can tie into Agatha Christie, whether it be the title of her books or a character from her books or the author herself. If you can make it a connection, go ahead and knit it. The main purpose is just to foster some conversation and some community in the group there. And it's always nice to see the chatter that goes on in there. So thank you for everyone who's participating and to take the time to contact me each week, either through Ravelry or through YouTube. Your comments and feedback are always very much appreciated, so thank you. It's a little strange. It's morning, and I don't usually record in the morning, so it feels a little bit odd, but I'm under a bit of a time crunch today, and last week's episode took forever to upload, and I didn't want to run out of time. So I had planned to record yesterday, but I was in the middle of a project that I didn't want to stop. And then also it was absolutely pouring down rain, so it was actually very dark and noisy. There were times the rain was just pounding down, and it was muggy, so I had quite a few of the windows open, so it was actually probably wouldn't have been the best lighting and day to record anyway. My lighting's not as good as usual. I don't think. It was a little bit sunny early on. My window here faces east, so that's why I usually record in the afternoon. Faces west. That's why I usually record in the afternoon, because I get that better lighting in the afternoon. But I tried a couple of other locations today, and they just weren't working out. So hopefully the lighting's not too bad. This week, I'm just kind of flying by the seat of my pants. I have a few notes written down, but I'm going to do more detailed show notes once I have this podcast uploading. So forgive me if I'm a little bit scattered. This week we're going to talk about what I'm wearing, some finished projects, some works in progress. I have a sewing segment this week. I'll talk a little bit about what I'm reading and also a little bit about my week. So if you'd like, grab yourself a nice hot or cold drink and sit back and settle in. I am just drinking some Irish breakfast tea this morning. Whoops, I got lipstick on my cup. Using my lovely house finch cup. This is, the house finches right now are very frequent visitors to the feeder, and because it's spring and mating season, they have their males are extremely bright red at this time of year, and they're really pretty. Catch them in the tree in that spot of color. So I'm gonna have a little sip, and then I'll get going. So what am I wearing? Well, the astute among you will recognize this yarn. You're probably sick and tired of seeing it. I see the camera today is doing that same kind of psychedelic lighting on this sweater. I'm not sure what it is about this fabric that picks that up, but maybe you can see it. Just there's weird lighting here. In any case, this is Green Gable, and it's by Rachel Bishop, and it is knit from Hemp for Knitting, all hemp 6, and the aubergine colorway. So I'm calling it my aubergine gables. So for those who may have not have tuned in before, this yarn started out as a lace sweater, and I finished it a few weeks ago, or a couple of weeks ago, I guess, and just wasn't happy with the fit or how the style looked on me. So I took it all apart and I reknit it into something I thought would be more wearable and more flattering, and this is the result. So I altered the pattern a little bit. On the pattern you can see it's got quite a wide neckline. So what I did is I added a couple of rows of knit 2 purl 2 rib around the neck to begin with the smaller needle, and then I also did a couple of rows of short rows shaping to bring the neckline up a little bit in the back. And then I just proceeded as written. I tried it on quite often so I would make sure to get this length from of the raglan correct for where it divides for the sleeves. So I'm quite happy with how that turned out. Then I basically knitted as written, except that I did alter where I located the waist shaping. I brought it in 1/4 of the way in on the fronts and about 1/3 of the way in on the back on each side, and I did a little bit more shaping than had been indicated in the pattern. And then I added on the sleeves a very minor modification. I just knit several rows before adding the knit 2 purl 2 ribbing on the sleeve. I just wanted them slightly longer than the pattern was. So I'll just stand up so you can see. Very pleased with how it fit. I also did a mock seam here. I purled this stitch along each side just to look like a seam, and I thought it might add a little bit more stability. So yes, yay! We have success. I have a garment from this hemp yarn that I will actually wear, so I'm very delighted by that. It was well worth ripping out the other one and knitting this into something wearable. So this is the last time you're going to have to hear about the hemp yarn. I'm curious to see, I've washed it several times. I washed it to block the lace sweater, and then I've washed it again to block this sweater. It's still not as soft and drapey as I was hoping it would be, but I'm interested to see how it will react with more wear and more washes. The only other caution or concern I have is that each time I've worn it, you know, a fair bit of dye has come out of this yarn, and I'm hoping that it doesn't fade out on me too much. I know that reds and purples or dark colors are more susceptible to bleeding with washing. And I also know that wool wash sometimes will make the dye release more. So the first time I had washed it, I used wool wash. This time I just used, I have a very mild laundry detergent and used that, and again it had a bit of bleeding. So we'll see how that pans out too over time. But for now I'm very happy with how it's turned out. I'm going to give you also, I'm just going to shift things around. I'm going to show you one last look at the top-down baby cardigan that I completed. I showed you the finished project last week, but I've since added buttons to it, and I just wanted to show you how cute that looked with the buttons. I was able to find ones exactly, very complementary to the yellow, red, and green that were used. The yellow and red buttons are the same. I had to go with a different style for the green, but they're all about the same size and shape, so I didn't think that mattered since there's so much going on in this cardigan as it is. So this is a top-down baby raglan cardigan. It's by the Beehive Wool Shop in Victoria, British Columbia. It was put together as a kit. Now, I don't think it's on Ravelry. I think I tried to link it in my project page and couldn't. But if you want the details, such as they are, you could visit my project page for it. I think I called it a colorful cardigan. You'll see the picture anyway on the project page. So there you go. And then I went shopping. This is for my great nephew, and his baby shower is coming up early next month. So I got a little pair of navy pants to go with it, and picked up a couple of shirts. there's this little royal one that matches really well, and then I picked up a red one too. So it's so cute. It turned out to be, I wasn't sure when I was knitting it what size it actually was in terms of 6 months, 12 months, etc. So I took it shopping with me and compared it to other garments, and it worked up to be about a 6-month size. So that's what the size clothing that I got to match. So yeah, there's that. Very happy about that. One more finished project. Had some car knitting time this past weekend, and so I was able to finish my Opal Sweet and Spicy 3 socks. The color saffron I guess is in English, and I used a complimentary heel. It was, oh dear, I can't remember. I think it might have been the Unique Sheep yarn, but I'm not positive. Anyway, you can again find that information if you're dying to know it on my projects page. So yeah, very happy to finish those. I was inspired by one of the podcast viewers to knit these by, I saw them on her project page. So very happy with how they turned out. Looking forward to wearing them. Just really pretty colors in there. They were a real pleasure to knit. Try to figure out where to put everything. I've got stuff everywhere. So I'll move on to what I'm working on this week. Well, let's talk about these first. Whenever you finish a pair of socks, you need to cast on a new one. I always like to have at least one pair of plain vanilla socks going at a time. So I'll just throw these onto soft blockers just so you can get a better look. So I cast on some new socks out of the West Yorkshire Spinners Signature 4-ply. The yellow contrast is color 240, which is butterscotch. And I'm going to use that for the cuffs, heels, and toes. And I'll just grab the label here. The patterned yarn is called Blue Tit, and let's see what color number it is. 818. So again, there's the label. Now, I've knit a pair of socks from this yarn before. I made them for my daughter as a gift, and I did the, I think all I did was put contrasting heels in the black color. So these are going to be for me, and I'm going to do the yellow heel, toe, and cuff. And I had actually at the time, I liked this colorway so much, I had purchased 2 skeins. So I'm knitting, I'm knitting from 2 separate skeins and just picking up where I left off with my daughter's socks. And I should have enough for one final pair of socks out of that yarn when I'm done. But I probably won't knit those right away. I'll need a bit of a break. But yes, if you were watching last week, you would have seen that I got a big shipment of the West Yorkshire Spinners yarn, and I thought rather than breaking into some of the new, other than for the contrast, that I should knit up some that I already had. That just seemed right, the right thing to do. So I have also, excuse me for reaching out of frame, another pair of socks that I cast on since last week, and this is going to be for the Grocery Girls May Sock Bash, and it is the Apple Blossom Socks by Helen Stewart. Only I'm calling them my Lilacs in Bloom socks just because the green and purple in the yarn is more reminiscent of lilacs than it is apples or apple blossoms. Not sure if you can. It's a very subtle yarn, and with this lighting you can't really see really well. but it has little bits of purple and green through it. I guess you can see it up here in the ribbing a little bit. Maybe more in the skein. Yeah, there you go. So this yarn is the Crafts Meow Ice Cream Sundae in the green tea fusion colorway. And there's the card. It doesn't look like this person's dying anymore though. I looked at the Etsy shop and it didn't seem like it had been active for quite a long time. So these are coming along well. I just have one more 6-row repeat before I before it's time to do the heel. And I can see why everyone raves about this pattern. It's very simple and yet it's very pretty. So you can knit on it while you're doing other things. And yet it's a little bit more interesting than just a plain stockinette or ribbed sock. So I'm enjoying those quite a bit. And my final work in progress is the, also by Helen Stewart, is the Fairy Hill Shawl. This is the first shawl pattern in the Shawl Society 2 series. There's a couple other views of it. So you can do it in 2 colors, a medium size or large size, medium I think she calls it, or in 1 color. I'm actually knitting it in, I'm knitting the instructions for the medium, and I may even, I think I'll actually have enough to add to that if I want to. And, oh, I didn't put the label. In Sweater Maker Yarns Fiona, and it's just a silk lace weight yarn. It didn't have a colorway name, and I got it a few years ago on Vancouver Island in a shop that's local to the dyer. So this is how it's coming up so far. It's quite almost a greeny background. It doesn't greeny yellow. Not sure if that shows up as well. You know, lace projects are hard to show anyway, and it's getting to the point where it's starting to outgrow the needles a little bit. But the colors in here are just so pretty. Soft yellow and green and these beautiful pinks and purples. So I'm enjoying watching the colors come up. And the lace pattern is quite simple. It's just a 4-row repeat here, and 2 of those rows are just purling back, so it's very simple, almost a chevron effect with the lace little triangles. I'm now, according to the pattern, 25% done, but I think I'm only about less than 20%, maybe even 15 or 17, I can't remember exactly how much percent through my yarn I am, and that's why I know I'll have enough to add to this. And of course, being lace weight, it's going to work up quite a bit smaller than the fingering weight version, which is what it was written for. So yeah, that's it's coming along. Now I have to say, working with the lace weight is not as comfortable as working with fingering weight. I'm finding my hands are a little bit tired, especially my left hand. I knit like this, but this sort of feeds the, grips the needle, feeds my stitches up to the needle, and I find that my hands right around in here get a bit tired working on it, just the way I have to grip it. It's a little bit different than fingering, definitely finer, a little bit harder to work with than fingering weight yarn, but because I've had this in my stash so long, I'm really happy to finally be knitting with it, because I've admired it for a long time. The colors are just so gorgeous, and I thought they were very fairy-like, which is why I chose them for this shawl. So I think for the next little while, because the Apple Blossom socks are for the May Sock Bash, I kind of have a time limit on that to the end of May, and also the shawl, there'll be a new one coming out near the beginning of June. So I think those are the 2 projects that I'll probably focus on the most in the next week or so, or week or 2, depending how long they take. I have been working on a couple of sweaters I showed last week. I may may tackle breathing space a little bit more. I'm contemplating, I know I've talked a lot about the Find Your Fade and how I was adapting that pattern and trying out different yarns. I haven't touched it since last week, so I'm not sure what the fate of that sweater is going to be. As I mentioned last week, I wasn't convinced the quite variegated yarn was right for me anyway. It's been fun to work on and fun to see how the yarns have been playing together and knitting up, but I have a feeling that one may not see its way to completion. But for now, I'm just going to put that on hold and concentrate on these other projects that I am happy with for sure, and again have a bit of a deadline. So that's what's coming, or that'll be what's coming up this week. So as I mentioned, I actually have a sewing segment this week. It's not very exciting, I have to say, but I'm working on sewing up a pair of curtains and also valances for one of the cabins up at our family property. We were up there last week. One of the cabins is getting a bit of a makeover, and so being the sewer in the family, I've been charged with doing up the new curtains. So it's just a very neutral beige print, so nothing too exciting. And then these are lined just with a white lining. These are for bedrooms. We wanted a little bit more, make them more opaque, that's the right word, solid. So that, you can't see in and when the lights are on in the room, and also keeps the sun out a little bit in the morning. So I had not actually, I realized as I was preparing to sew these up that I've never done a lined broad pocket curtain before. So I Googled it and I found some instructions. This one had you working your hems on both your curtain and lining fabric first, and then sewing right sides together along the top, and then sewing right sides together, leaving a gap here for the rod pocket, and then sewing it together down the sides, turning it right side out and pressing. And then I sewed 1 inch from the top to have that sit above the rod pocket, and then the rod pocket is here. So there's the rod pocket, and there's the little bit at the top. And then at the bottom, it's open a little bit, and you just turn this raw edge in from the side seam, and then I tacked it here and here to keep the raw edges from showing. You'll see there's a seam down at the bottom. I made a big mistake, and when I was figuring out the fabric for the curtains, I forgot to allow for some overhang at the bottom of the window sill. And so I had a little bit of fabric remaining, so I added a little bit of an extra strip on the bottom. And then also I had taken pictures of what was there and realized the curtain rod is sitting a fair bit, that's currently there, is sitting a fair bit above the window. So if we move it down 1 inch or so, it should be just fine. But yeah, that's one half of the bedroom curtain. I've done the second half. I've cut out all the valances. There are 6 windows, and they're just in common areas, so they don't really need to be to block out light or don't need them for privacy. We have some blinds on the windows that face the road, which is where anyone's likely to see in, and so fuzz, I guess, tickling my nose there. So it's just to add a little bit of a decorative touch to the room. We're just unifying them. We're making them all the same. Right now they're, I think, in the main living room area. I think on the 4 windows there's like 3 different valances. So it's just to give everything a fresh look, and also to just unify everything. So I'll be working on those again starting next week. I have things going on over the weekend, so I won't get to it till then. little bit about what I'm reading. I've moved on to Agatha Christie, 13 at Dinner. And this is a Hercule Poirot mystery. It involves an actress who was heard saying that she would like her her estranged husband to be rid of. And so she apparently arrives at his house and is let in, and later, after she's gone, he's discovered murdered. So it seems like an open and shut case, except that at the same time that he was supposedly killed, she was across town having dinner with 12 other people. So there's the mystery, and we'll find out who done it. I guess almost halfway through now. So that's keeping my attention. I was thinking, for some reason, this one was a collection of short stories, and then when I started reading, I realized, oh no, it was a whole novel, so that's good. Oh, there's a little bit of sun peeking through. It was actually sunnier earlier this morning, so I thought the light would be pretty good, and then it had clouded over. It's still quite a bit of clouds, and they're a bit dark, so we might get some rain also, but we'll see. So what about my week? Well, we had a lovely weekend last weekend. My husband and my brother-in-law and I headed up to our family property. We actually stayed overnight, Friday night and Saturday night at my mom's place. She's about 17K or 10 miles from the family property, and the cabins are cold this time of year, and we hadn't got them open for the season yet, and hadn't got the water running. So one of the main reason that my husband and my brother-in-law had planned to go up this past weekend was to rip some carpets out of the cabin that we're kind of giving a refresher to, and we're replacing it with lino. So that work is supposed to take place next weekend. I have 3 of my sisters and their husbands and us are going up and doing a bit of a work party and opening the camp up for the season, and at that time planning to replace or install the linoleum or vinyl flooring or whatever you want to call it. And the guys wanted to see what was underneath this carpet, so that if it needed some work before the new flooring went in, they would be prepared for that. So they did do that, and one of the floors is great. One needs a little bit of patchwork, but my brother-in-law has picked up something that should solve that problem. So it was definitely well worth investigating it beforehand. And then also at the same time, one of my cousins is doing some work up north, and he's passing through about once a month or so on average, and he was staying overnight at the cabin. It was actually quite warm in there. He had the fire going and a heater, and it actually was quite comfortable. But he didn't have water running. He'd got some out of the pipe that we have flowing from the spring, and so he did okay for that. But we've had some issues with our water system the last couple of years, with not the flow coming from the spring that's usual, and also issues with the tank, just periodically the pump just shutting off, and then you have to go and lift up this float and reset it, and then it works fine. But he originally had put the pump system in, and he's done a lot of work on the water system, so he was a great person for my husband and brother-in-law to be there with and see if we could solve some of those issues. So they did, in fact. They made some modifications up at the spring itself, and seemed to solve that issue of the slower flow. So that'll be great. The tank filled in about an hour, which sometimes it just comes in at such a slow trickle, or has in the past couple of years periodically. So anyway, that it was well worth going to get that some work done there and solve that issue, at least temporarily, and hopefully that it continues. The way up there was we've had some heavy rains last week, and it caused some flooding up in the high water and some flooding up in the interior where we were. And in fact, one of the towns that we went through early that Friday morning, the fire chief had been checking on the rising rivers in his, or creek and river in his small town, and must have been swept in. He'd gone missing and still hasn't been found. So that's a real tragedy for that town. And 2 years ago, they experienced some really bad flooding. So it's kind of like history repeating itself a bit, although the flooding this time was nowhere near as bad. There was a little bit of water on the road as we drove through, and the river going through town was quite high, dirty, and just flowing really fast. One of the major rivers that we travel along to get to where we're going is normally kind of a greeny blue, and it flows into the Fraser River, which is known for being brown most of the time. It goes through a lot of area and collects a lot of silt. And surprisingly, this time the Thompson River, it's called, which is usually quite clear, was also very brown. And I don't know if I've ever seen it that dirty before. And there's several waterfalls that flow into it that we see along the way, and they were coming down brown on Friday night, but by the time we headed home Sunday, they had cleared up again. And our own creek, we have a creek that runs through our property, and it was also quite brown and very high and very fast, and normally it's not very deep and just kind of flows along at a fairly leisurely pace, so it was quite something to see. Part of the pipes leading, or hose pipes leading from the spring down to our water holding tank and pump system, it runs in the creek and along the creek. So thankfully there were no breaks in that system, as there have sometimes been in the past, because the water would have been really dangerous to go into. We wouldn't have wanted to anyone risk their safety doing that. So thankfully that didn't turn out to be an issue. So that worked out well. And so we had a very productive day on Saturday, and actually it was crazy. It was we're up at the spring in the morning, and all of a sudden some snowflakes started coming down. It was almost like, when a blossoms start to blow off a tree, and you just have that kind of gradual, the petals floating down in the wind, or in the in the breeze. That's how the snow was at first. It came down a little bit heavier, never enough to stick, but it did that off and on throughout the course of the day. It just and you could see the mountain right behind our property had snow at the very top, and as we drove up and down, we could see some of the mountains also with snow on them that normally are clear this time of year, or often clear this time of year. So yeah, still a little nippy up there. While the guys were working on the carpet, I got the wheelbarrow out and started picking up some of the deadfall. We normally have, over the course of the winter with the snow, etc., that branches will come down, or twigs and such. This year actually was not too bad at all. I only had to fill it twice, and sometimes we're filling it 10, 12 times. Like, it was very, very little debris or deadfall for this time of year. So that's good. Because when we head up in next weekend, probably the grass will be ready to cut, so it'll be nice. It'll be ready to go, and we won't have to worry about all the stuff on the ground. So I'm trying to think. This week, I'm not a shopper. I don't enjoy shopping, but a couple of the stores were having some good deals on spring and summer tops. So I did that on Oh, I know. I went fabric shopping for the curtains and had some other errands to run, and then also did a bit of clothes shopping on Tuesday. And by the time I was done, it was almost 3 o'clock. I couldn't believe it. I asked someone what time it was. I was like, oh, there's my whole day gone. And then I hadn't made a decision on the fabric. I talked to my mom that night and conferred with her with what she thought, and then I went back on Wednesday and picked it up and made a different decision. I'm glad I talked to her, because what we ended up with, I think, is more in line with what she was wanting, and then proceeded to kind of get the fabric ready. So yesterday morning I cut everything out, and then sewed up the curtains yesterday afternoon and evening. So that's done, and then, like I say, I'll start the valances next week. Because on today's Friday, and we're going to have our 6-year-old grandson overnight tonight. His sister often gets to have sleepovers. She goes to her mom's probably once a month anyway for the weekend, and he's old enough now that he's jealous that he doesn't get to have sleepovers as often as his sister does. So we're going to have him overnight tonight, and we'll do something fun. He requested ham and pineapple pizza for dinner, so I'll put some bread in the dough in the bread maker, and when I go pick him up, we'll go pick out the ingredients for that, and I'll let him choose something fun for dessert. And I'm not sure what we're going to do. My husband's working tomorrow, so I thought I'd do something with him. I know the weather's not supposed to be great, so I don't know if we'll just hang out here or maybe find somewhere to go. I don't know. Anyway, it won't matter. He likes to play games and stuff, and of course there's always fun movie or something to watch. So it'd be nice. It's nice to have one-on-one time with the various grandkids, because most of the time we see them. Well, I usually see my granddaughter, on her own. I look after her fairly often during the day, and or if my daughter comes to visit, the kids are at school. So I do get to see her on her own quite often. But now that my grandson's in school, I don't see him as frequently, or my older granddaughter. So it'll be nice. It'll be nice to have some time together. And then, of course, Sunday's Mother's Day. So happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. My sister-in-law has invited us for supper on Sunday. It's not just because it's Mother's Day, but it was my brother-in-law's birthday yesterday. So she's going to celebrate that. And it's actually my son-in-law's birthday early next week, so I imagine we'll celebrate that too. So that'll be nice to get together with them. And and then next week I'll have I'll be busy sewing those valances. I think they're going to take me longer than I think they are. Usually projects like that do. And then we're heading back up to the cabin on Friday for a few days. And as I say, we're going to have a kind of a work party with my sisters and their husbands and my mom, and just get camp ready for the season. But the nice thing is that with lots of people doing things and already having the water running is a big plus. So we'll actually get some time to just hang out and enjoy our time there too. It won't all be work, so that'll be good. And I have another cousin that has one of the cabins. He's heading up there too, so that'll be nice he's kind of like the brother that I never had. He grew up, he and his brother grew up close to us when I was a kid, and he's always kind of been like our big brother, so it'd be good to see him too. So I think that's it. It's about, it's after 11 now, so I'm going to get this uploading, and it's all in one take, so that should be good, although sometimes the shorter little bits, they take less time to upload, but there are more of them, so this is one. Hopefully it doesn't take too long to upload, and then I'll do a little bit of editing if necessary, and should be able to post it later today. So everyone have a good week. Happy knitting to you, and again, thanks for tuning in and watching. If you have any questions or comments, by all means stop by the Ravelry group and let me know what you think. And or if you want, you can always give me a private message there too. So yeah, take care everyone. Happy knitting. Bye.